Hello out there, and today's video is going to be a discussion about steel, and maybe some people will consider it a rant. I don't know what this video is going to get into and how far I'm going to go with it, so yeah, we'll wait and see. But yeah, I just want to talk about steel and steel type and if it really even matters anymore. You know, for me, as things go on and on, as time goes by, I've started to have different priorities and different needs when it comes to what I look for in a knife. And I've just noticed some of the information that I'm getting and some of the trends that I'm having, in my opinion, starting to line up when it comes to steel. And I wanted to take some time to talk about that today. Before we get too far into it, a couple caveats. First of all, my opinion is just my opinion. I am certainly not the most informed person when it comes to steel. I'm informed by my experience. And so all of the things that I'm going to be talking about are based off of my experiences with knives and steel and what I need for a knife, which might be very different from what you need a knife to be. So obviously keep that in mind. The other thing is, if you agree with me or disagree with me, it doesn't really matter. Like, we can be cool. It doesn't matter if I see things one way and you see things different. One of my favorite things about this hobby, about life in general, but this hobby especially, is that the community is so diverse, with people coming from different kinds of perspectives, different motivations when it comes to what you're looking for in a knife and what you want your collection to be. Some people are just hard users. Some people are bushcrafters. Some people are high-end collectors that don't use their knives. Some of them are high-end collectors that do use their knives. You know, some of them are people who just like a bunch of budget EDC, and some of them are a mixed bag, sort of like me, you know. Some people are really into steel, and if you're really into steel and that really matters to you, cool. If that's what makes you happy, I mean, and you're buying knives with different steel types, and that's the thing that's important to you, good for you, man. And I mean, I've got a part of that in me as well. So before we get too far into anything, like, let's keep that in mind. I have a mini griptilian in every steel that it's been made in, not really because I value this quality of the steel over that quality of this steel. It was really just because it was different variations and I wanted to collect them all. Just thought it would be a cool thing. You know, what it is was sort of irrelevant. It was just, I wanted to get one of each. So people have their own motivations and their own draw to it. And that's very important to keep in mind, that no matter what goes on, like, we can be cool at the end of this. All right. But what I want to talk about really, guys, is just when it comes to steel, I have noticed that I had a time period in my collecting where it started to really matter. And I was chasing the really fancy sprint run stuff. I was trying to get my hands on everything. Oh, this new thing came out, this alloy, this powdered that, you know, whatever it was. And at the end of a period of time, I look back and I realized all this stuff just cuts. It's all good. And for my purposes, I don't need anything better. And for me, more and more, the steel that is stamped on the side of the blade just does not matter. If I can get a knife sharp and I can get it to function in a way that gets me through a day, hopefully more than a day, but gets me through my day at work if I need to use it, then I'm going to be in good shape. And that's really more and more the simple way that I'm breaking it down. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a value discussion to be had when you're paying, you know, high prices for maybe more inferior products. And we all want to get our bang for the buck when it comes to anything that we're purchasing. I understand that completely. But what I'm getting at is that I do not look at a model and say, that's going to be crap because of this steel. Unless we're going really far down, like the 3CRs and that kind of stuff. You know, 8CR 13MOV, for me, as you guys probably know, it works just fine. There's a limit to how much I'll pay when I have other knives on my list that I want to get, sure. But when it comes to just using a knife, no, I don't really exclude 8CR at all. You know, and I understand, you know, there's a lot of people that do, and I don't know, I just didn't want to deprive myself of designs and models that were interesting because of a steel that might not be as good as another steel. CRKT is a perfect example of this, and I think I have the new Overland in my pocket on loan from my buddy Jack Farmboy. Really awesome guy. Sent me this to check out. This knife I like a whole lot more than I like the Tuna, by the way, and we will do a review on this one. But I mean, this design, it's a beauty. It's a great design. TJ Schwartz, really love it. It's an 8CR and it's $45. So what am I going to do? I really want the design, you know. Am I supposed to not buy this knife because it's 8CR? And honestly, if I'm being real with myself, if I'm being truthful and honest, then I know that this knife can perform in a way that's going to get me through every single one of my tasks. So why would I deprive myself of getting a knife like this for 45 bucks and getting the design? For me, the design and the execution of the design is arguably the most important aspect of the knife. You know, when we talk about stuff like that and we compare knives, a lot of times in my videos, especially lately, I'm saying values in the eye of the beholder, because when you look at a design, you're going to pay what you think is appropriate, and if the design really calls to you, you're going to pay more for it. Think about with a car, if you're going car shopping, right? The way a car looks really matters to some people. You know, for me, I drive a Toyota Corolla, like, I just have a car, it looks like a decent car, it's fine. But people pay thousands upon thousands of extra dollars for cars that aren't going to run that much better than my Toyota Corolla, because they're looking at like aesthetics and they're looking at other physical aspects, not necessarily the way it's going to perform, but like we're talking about interior and materials and stuff like that. And that makes perfect sense. I get that. You know, if you see a good looking thing, you want to pay a little bit of extra money for it. If it appeals to you, that is perfectly sensible. And it goes right back to knives. That's exactly how I am with knives. I mean, this is a $45 knife. There are plenty of knives with the same materials that are half this price. But the design is what matters. That's what draws me. So the steel 8CR on that isn't gonna push me away from making a purchase at all. It just doesn't make any sense, you know, for me to deprive myself of something that is interesting in all other facets. Now, again, if you're a steel guru and that's your thing, then you're not going to agree with that point. And I completely get it. You know, but another thing that I think about and that I keep hearing about in other people's videos is just the difference in all of the testing. And I think the reason why I wanted to make this video, and I've kept putting it off for months and months, is that I have been continually getting more information about steel. More information about how it actually is performing. I'm watching guys like Super Steel Steve. I was watching guys like Banter 365 or what was his Banner 247? Sorry, I can't even remember. Guy took a break from YouTube, which is a real bummer because his videos were really good. But I'm going to link to some of this stuff down below. But there's some videos where, you know, a guy like Super Steel Steve, who, you know, does some very controlled testing. A guy like Super Steel Steve does this with S35VN and M390, and he gets this result where the M390 barely outperforms the S35VN. And, you know, he's trying to control all the variables that he can, and it's just because of heat treats, you know, and his argument, you know, I think in the video that I'm talking about, he was talking about HRC and how, you know, the steel is, you know, it's not just the type of the steel, it's how it's actually heat treated that can be really important to how it performs, right? And obviously that's a fact, but for me, my big takeaway is that looking at the name of the steel on the blade stamp, you know, that stamp doesn't tell you everything. So when people say, oh, I don't really like S35 anymore, I want M390, or they say, oh, I wish it was in D2 instead of 8CR, or I wish it was in this rather than that, you know, you're not getting a snapshot of quality per se when you're just looking at the type of steel. Obviously, you can get an understanding of, like, 8CR is only going to be as good as 8CR can be. I get that. But, you know, the argument, and I think the mindset that a lot of people have, that's like, oh, well, this is not good anymore. It just isn't a valid argument. And it's not one that, at least not everybody comes to that discussion with the amount of information that they should. And who knows, maybe I'm coming to the discussion with less information than I should. I mean, like, that's a thing, you know, everybody has an opinion. And I mean, the point of videos like this isn't to rile feathers, it's to have a discussion. If I'm aired in anything in like my thought process here, I welcome the comments and the feedback. And you guys know, whenever you give me information that I have incorrect or when I misspeak in a video, you let me know, and I appreciate that, because you guys are helping make my knowledge base stronger and wider, and that's good. But I just think generally, You know, when people just come to that table with this is better than this, I need this and not that, and it just isn't really true. It isn't true. If you want it, then good. If you really want it, but like, what do you need the better steel for? What do you need S35 or what do you need M390 over S35 for? Like, really, what do you need it for? You know, has cardboard really improved technologically? Like, are we in a situation where like cardboard is really getting harder to cut over the years? Because it hasn't. It's the same, you know, and the knives that our grandfathers used like still work just fine, and they didn't have anything really fancy at all. Someone left me a comment a few weeks ago actually that said like the astronauts who went to the moon had 420 HC. So like what do we need K390 for? Like, really, what do we really need it for? Now, again, there are groups in the community who do need it, who do use it. My buddy Jeff Jewell, my buddy Blade Collector 7, a few guys that I know, they hard use their knives. They beat the crap out of them. They put them through their paces, and it's not for testing purposes. I mean, they need to use a knife hard at work every day. They're going to abuse it. They need specific attributes in their tools in order for them to be successful. That's awesome. And so they're looking for specific things sometimes when they're purchasing a knife. That's great. But, I mean, for me, I'm breaking down boxes, I'm cutting packages, I'm doing straps, I'm doing a little bit of rope here and there when it's attached to another package. But, like, that's really what I'm doing. So, what do I care if I have 8CR? Like, really, what do I care? Like, 8CR is just fine. And, honestly, if we're going to talk about 8CR for a second again, honestly, I really sort of enjoy being able to put an edge on something because I'm a crap sharpener, a crappy sharpener, and I can put a screaming sharp edge on 8CR, no problem, super quick. That feels good. It's fun to be able to do that. So for me, like, 8CR is actually a little bit of fun, you know? And there's nothing lacking, you know, there's nothing missing from my use or experience with a knife because I don't have a better steel. You know, and I mean, it all depends on what you're looking for. Again, and I'm going to just be a broken record with that shit, just saying it over and over again. I get it. But another thing that I look at is just the size of my collection. Like, I have a knife that can be super durable. I have a knife that can be, you know, heavy duty that I can beat the crap out of. You know, if I only had 3 or 4 knives in my collection, would I be very choosy with what I picked up? Absolutely. But I don't. And I know a lot of people don't. A lot of the people who are saying, I need M390 over S35VN, you have enough M390. Like, you're good. If you ever are going to need something that, like, fancy and high-end, it's going to be fine, you know? And getting back to this whole cardboard, the innovations of cardboard, that little joke and thing, but it just sort of was meant as a point that, like, the world hasn't changed that much that we need so much higher end quality. And one of the things that I always think about with that is D2. How D2 is like, yeah, it's a good user steel now, and it's one that is like above 8CR, I guess, and so people are really liking that as an upgrade from when CRKT and say Kershaw does it in a more budget knife. You can get it pretty cheap now because a lot of the Chinese companies are doing it. But D2 is a fantastic steel. It's a fantastic steel. It can be, at least. You know, D2 I've used extensively in a ton of different things, like so much D2. And I go back, you know, I've got a couple Benchmade limited editions, like $200-300 knives. They made them in D2. Like, this was a sought after steel not even 10 years ago. Like, people wanted to get their hands on this stuff. And now it's almost like an afterthought, like, oh, D2 isn't good enough anymore. You know, the world hasn't changed that much, guys. It just hasn't. We still have the same problems and the same needs. The only thing that changes is us and what we're really looking for. You know, and if the things that I'm talking about, if the steel type really matters to you, great. But the more I look at it, it just doesn't make sense. And it really doesn't always it really doesn't always tell you what the performance is going to be, and it certainly doesn't tell you what the quality is going to be. Just sort of going back and forth on tangents here, guys, and I'm sorry, but when I did some D2 testing a couple years ago, where I had a whole bunch of different D2 blades from a few different companies, probably 6 or 7 blades total, all sharpened to like about the same angle, same kind of deal. And I just wanted to see what D2 was the best. I wanted to see if like Two Sons D2 was really D2, and see if Steel Wills was going to outperform Benchmade's, that sort of thing. And I also, as a control group, I had almost all of my 556 mini griptilians sharpened to the same way as well. And I had them in 440C, 154CM, M4. I think that's it. So I did a bunch of controlled tests, more controlled tests than I've ever done, which controlled tests really aren't my thing because I still tend to create variables. But in that testing, I mean, I found the 440C mini grip was just destroying stuff. It was just killing it, And I stopped those tests short because it got to the point where I was like, it doesn't matter anymore. We're counting cuts like in the hundreds here. Like, I'm never going to need a knife to perform on this level. So like what Super Steel Steve said in his video with S35 and the M390, like we're talking about 10 extra cuts over the course of a few hundred cuts. Like, who's going to notice that? And once you put variables into the mix, like who's really going to notice that? So yeah, I mean, more and more, just that stamp on the blade, it doesn't tell the whole story. And for the people who think it does, I mean, I would just suggest you look further into it, or don't. I mean, if that physical stamp is what matters to you, like with me with the mini grips in the collection, I mean, all mine could be 8CR. Who gives a shit? I mean, I was just collecting them for that stamp, so I get it. I get that draw. But for me and using an EDC, it just really, it just really isn't that important. Sorry, guys, I have a couple notes just to try to make sure I hit some of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. But yeah, that D2 testing, I mean, that stuff that I did, it was good. And I don't think I'll ever do anything like that again, mostly because the world is just full of variables. And it's very good to have people in the community, the Steves, the Cedric and Adas, who are going to put things through tests in a controlled setting. But that's just not what I see in my life. And I've seen enough 8CR of so many different varieties from different companies that, sometimes it just goes and sometimes it just doesn't. And I mean, those variables from the factory are real life variables. And it's really good to have a good understanding of what things are capable of. But it's also important to know that that's not what you're going to see in the real world all the time. And so for the person who isn't an expert sharpener like myself, the person who's just watching a video to get an understanding of what a knife can do out of box, because you might not ever be a person who's going to take it apart. You might not be a person who's ever going to have any kind of sharpening system that isn't a rudimentary one. That can be an important conversation as well. And so that's sort of what I stick to. And I let the experts be the experts, For me, all like the hardcore testing and the spine whack testing stuff, it isn't important. I like to know that my knife is going to be able to do the things that I need it to do. And if it's able to go above and beyond that, and someone tells me that, that's great. But like, I don't need to be the guy test driving the car and like, pushing it to speeds that it's never hit before. Like, you tell me you can do that. All right, I'll believe you. And if I'm in that situation, I'll make it happen. But as it is, I mean, when you see cutting on this channel, it's going to be just basic to give you an idea of how the actual knife moves through the media. But that's really it. All right, guys. So that's it. I don't really know that this was a rant. This was sort of just my take on steel and why I feel the way that I do about it, and what I am looking for going forward. 8CR is definitely not going to be eliminated from contention ever. Unless there's a value conversation to be had and there's a budget, which there is. I might not be able to buy a $50 8CR knife if I'm trying to buy a $90 knife with something that is either different or the same. But it always comes back to what your individual priorities and preferences are. and we can make a value debate last forever because everybody's going to see things differently. And that is the best part of it. You know, if someone comments on this video or on my video that says, oh, I could have gotten the Overland for $45, but why would I do that when I could get a Civivi for $60? Hey, you want to know what? Like, I can't argue that point. I can't argue that point. But I also can't argue the guy who says, you want to know what? I bought the Overland for $45. I didn't buy the Civivi for $60 because I just like the way that knife looks and it's going to work for me. I can't argue that point either. So at the end of the day, this is all almost folly if if what matters to you really matters that much to you. But make sure you know. Make sure you know why you're in this and what you're really looking for in a knife. You know, what your priorities really are. All right? And let me know your comments, guys. Any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, you know where to reach me. Down below in the comments. I'll talk with you soon. Thanks very much for watching. Take care and have a good one.